Yai lai la 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 lai lai, ya la lai lai lai, yai la la lai lai la la lai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen, borei peri hagafen. Yai lai la 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 lai lai, yai lai la 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 lai lai, ya la lai 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 lai, ya la lai 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 lai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei minei vesamim, borei minei vesamim. Yai lai la 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 lai lai, yai lai la 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 lai lai, ya la lai 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 lai, ya la lai lai, ya la lai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei meorei ha'esh, borei meorei ha'esh. And since tonight is a Chag, we have Kodesh LaKodesh. We go from the Holy of Shabbat to the Holy of Pesach. Yai lai la 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 lai lai, yai lai la 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 lai lai, ya la lai 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 lai, la la lai lai la la lai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamavdil ben kodesh lekodesh. Hamavdil ben kodesh lekodesh. Yai lai la 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 lai lai, yai lai la 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 lai lai, ya la lai 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 lai, ya la lai lai, ya la lai. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi, Bimhera Beyamenu Yavo Eleinu. Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David, Shavua Tov, 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 Shavua Tov. A good week, everybody.
Okay.
We are going to start with lighting the candles. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner. We're working on it. Shel Yom Tov. We bless you, God, creator of the universe, who told us to light the festival candles. This is the light we need more than ever. This light is hope. This light is continuity. This light is a direct line between our hundreds of generations in the past and what we know is to come, what must come.
We need this light to show us the way forward. It hasn't been a year filled with light, but there were small glimmers which promise big things, be they in a syringe or a ballot box. The light hasn't gone out. The future still has hope, and we're still here to bless these candles.
Now we're going to bless the wine. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. We bless you, God, creator of the fruit of the vine.
And before we continue, I just want to note that if you want a copy of this Haggadah, you can get it later. There's nothing you need to have with you in front of you, because we're going to skip around. We're going to tell stories from the perspective of Passover, but we're not going to be halachic and follow the specific order of the Seder. You will recognize in the stories that we tell the themes of Passover, and you'll recognize some of the rituals that we do, but not all.
That you will recognize blessing the matzah. So for most of us, this is going to be the end of the matzah for this year. So this is the bread of affliction that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. All who are hungry, let them come and eat.
All who
are needy, let them come and celebrate with us. Now we are here. Next year, may we be in the land of deliverance. Now we are slaves. Next year, may we be free. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu al achilat matzah.
Adonai Elohim, here we are again at Passover. It's us, the children of Israel, and we remember crying out in need those many generations ago in Egypt. And you redeemed us then. It took 10 plagues and a lot of human suffering, but we were freed. Ever since, we remember that we were a people born from the plagues, and you never let us forget. When a new commandment was made or a prophet would emerge, our formative experience was always invoked. For I am the Lord your God, who led you out of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God. Over and over again, you told us that. And over again, we've repeated it, as if reminding ourselves and each other of the relationship. The Haggadah teaches that we must experience Passover like we personally came forth from Egypt. It doesn't take any leap of faith or great imagination to feel that this year. And over the course of this Seder, you will hear our voices telling our stories. Our first story tonight is from Chris and Rob Sullivan. Chris has been a member of Anshe Emet for 40 years. They lived together in East Brunswick. Chris retired as a teacher in elementary and special education in the New Brunswick school systems. Rob was an industrial plant manager for DuPont and then other companies after that. And Rabbi Baisley, if you'd spotlight them as well on this. Thank you. At the start of the pandemic last year, Rob developed a fever. A doctor diagnosed it by telemedicine as the flu and prescribed Tamiflu. The doctor said, monitor the temperature in case it gets worse, and it did. He was rushed to St. Peter's University Hospital in New Brunswick, where he was diagnosed with a urinary tract infection, but it still got worse. A blockage was found between one kidney and his bladder. It required emergency surgery, and then both kidneys began to fail and required emergency dialysis. The surgery was a success, but the dialysis continued. And after a stint at Power Back Rehabilitation in Piscataway, he was sent home. Rob, it must have felt good to go back home after that surgery. Was it an easy transition?
Rob, you're muted. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay.
You're good.
Okay. It wasn't much of a transition home because in 4 days later, I was back in the hospital, worse off than I was at that time with COVID. I'd caught it in one of the medical facilities that I was in, either the hospital or the rehab center.
So back to the hospital, back to St. Peter's you went?
Yes, I was. I was back in less than a week.
What was it like to be in St. Peter's with COVID? About a year ago, right?
Yeah, that was, I went in early April, about April 10th or something like that. And I was there in the hospital for about 5 weeks recovering from COVID. I had been in pretty poor physical condition because of the urinary tract infection. So I didn't have a lot of reserve or anything else to deal with. So I was placed in a total isolation room where I was under negative pressure so that everything was being exhausted outside, and just there by myself with my own thoughts, my own being 24/7 a day. The doctors who came in would stand in the doorway and talk with you. The nurses would run in long enough to get the vitals, and that was about it. So it's terrible isolation for all those weeks. And I had no physical ability to get up or to do anything. I was laying on my back as I deteriorated further. So it was terrible being alone with your own thoughts. You know, you have feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, and you have to put your faith in the divine, so to speak. It's the higher being and also the medical, but you don't know where you're going, whether you're going to make it or not. You get depression and you're alone. All you have is the phone calls and it's TV, and there's only so much you can do with that. You can't bring reading material in, you can't have any visitors. So it's desolation, much like the desert. You're in somebody else's hands.
Could Chris visit you during that second hospital stay?
Actually, it was the first hospital stay when Rob was put on full life support.
Well,
I asked the doctor, is this the end? And he said, no, he's got a chance, but we think it would be good for you to come in. Recovering from that was really tremendous. But after getting home from the rehabilitation, it just seemed like a dirty trick that just a few days later we realized he had contracted COVID, and then he had to come back to the hospital again, and that was extremely hard.
To make a long story short, I gave it to her. It was my birthday present to her, and she can tell you about what her ordeal was with COVID.
Well, this year is a better birthday, but yes, I knew that I might. And in fact, I couldn't get a test for COVID. People told me, if your husband has COVID, you have COVID. So I packed my bag, I continued to work, and took my vitals twice a day. When my pulse ox went to 87, and anything below 90 is you're getting in trouble. That's when I called my doctor. And he said, I want you in the hospital. I'm worried about you. And so I called the rescue squad, and then I called the family. And I assured them that I was going to be okay, that I was going to St. Peter's, and I would get excellent care. Don't worry.
Were you both there at the same time?
Yes, we were. Fortunately, she had a milder case and was out in 3 days and sent back home. And good that she was, because she really had a lot of caregiving to take care of me and run interference for me. There was a severe hospital staffing shortage, so it was hard to find a nurse or an aide or anybody to do anything for you. So she was my relay to the hospital, and she exerted herself well on my behalf.
And that was remote. She couldn't visit you again.
No, she couldn't. I never saw her once. And it was a long, lonely, 11 weeks from the start to the finish.
And in a 24-hour period while you were in the hospital, how much would you see a nurse or a physician? Or
If I had 10 minutes a day in the 24 hours, I was lucky. They took your vitals about every 2 or 3 hours. The doctor would stand in this doorway and talk to you for about 2 or 3 minutes, and your meals, and that was it. And I was nobody else in the room with me, just me.
Rob, were you intubated or no?
I was not for the COVID, but I was for the kidney infection.
Oh, wow.
So I was not in ICU, but I was on forced oxygen, 12 liters a minute when I went in. I could not breathe on my own. and I could not breathe without oxygen for 10 weeks, roughly.
And how did your family, how did they communicate with you?
Just telephone, that's all we could do, and an occasional Facebook or other kind of video conference call. But that's only so much that you can do. You can't touch, feel, love,
Right.
hug.
What kind of condition were you in when you left the second rehab and went home again?
Okay, I had gotten to the point where in the second rehab, I could get myself to sitting position and I could walk about 40 steps with a walker, but I had no physical strength. I'd lost 40 pounds. I was really emaciated. Fortunately, I had 40 pounds to lose because I might not have made it otherwise. But in any event, getting home was a real ordeal because I thought, well, gee, I'm home at last. I could sit outside. I had my wife. That's the only person I could talk to or to be with because the family wasn't allowed to visit or anybody else. Then you get to the realization that you can't go up the steps to go to bed. You got to sleep downstairs. You have to use the half bath. You don't take a shower, and I had not for 11 weeks. And you get tired of sponge baths after a while, believe me. But in any event, then started the ordeal of doctors. We ended up with about 12 different doctors, 2 or 3 a week, and dialysis, which is very, very taxing to the body. For those who haven't had it, it's a 4-hour dialysis every day. You come home and you're wiped, and you just sleep the rest of the night. The next day you feel like the devil, and then following day you're back in dialysis again, and it just goes on. And in between, when you feel just well enough, you're in a doctor's office someplace or other. So it was really an ordeal, draining on both of us. Thank God we had her.
What other after effects did you have when you came home from rehab?
Well, I still have lingering effects. COVID is not fun. You don't come home and you're just back to normal with this. I had a drop foot because of the rapid weight loss, and I still walk with a brace on the leg. I have sporadic coughing spells and some breathing difficulties. And I'm just tired a lot, so I have to rest. I used to sleep like 7 or 8 hours a day. Well, 10's just about right now. So it's just, you drag. But I try to get out my walk. I've been through physical therapy for 6 months, in-house, out-house, and so forth. And I'm back now to the point where I can do most things, but I walk with a cane, which is a thing I did not do before. So it's a long road. I think I've probably got another 6 to 12 months to go to get as best I can. I'm not the same person, but I got a lot of faith and trust.
Do you feel a special connection to the Passover story with what you've been through?
Oh, I do. I think it's a very, very good parallelism. I mean, you sit there in this whole 11-week journey was one where you're alone with your thoughts 24/7. You got depression. Sometimes you feel that this is enough. How can I get more? Especially after the kidney thing, I thought, well, I'm done. Now I get into COVID and I further deteriorate. So you struggle each and every day. You're in the hands of somebody else all the time. The medical profession, they don't tell you a whole lot. So you got to really put your power in the belief that somebody's guiding you or that you're going someplace. You're not in charge of your own destiny. You're kind of hopeless and maybe helpless sometimes. But that's all past now, and I think I'm pretty good.
It's an amazingly powerful story. And what I'm thinking of as I'm listening to this is that you are not alone. You know, these stories, we've all heard them on TV. We've read about them. These stories are so sadly not uncommon. And my guess is, you know, as the person who's the psychologist in this of the two of us, I think about all the support, the emotional support somebody needs, not just you and the two of you, but everybody involved with you who cares about you. And there's also, unfortunately, post-traumatic stress that can go along, you know, when you're feeling better and, you know, it's such a long haul to begin with, but there's obviously times afterwards where you look back and go, what just happened? You know, and you had doctors that didn't really know about this when you had this, you know, so they were really as new as you were to this.
That's right. I ended up getting plasma, fortunately, which I think was probably the turning point in my recovery from the COVID. And it was very brand new at the time.
Right.
But you're right. I wasn't alone. I had a lot of people. My wife must have gotten 100 cards from members of the temple and my family and strangers and other organizations and so forth. And that was very uplifting to have that. And you're really right. You're not alone. You're kind of wandering with a lot of people, so to speak. that are with you and feeling your pain and your sorrow and cheering you on.
And so many who have had the similar experiences to you as well, which is, we can't lose sight of.
Yes, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up.
Christine, where were you at when Rob came home the second time after having COVID, after going to rehab from the COVID hospital stay?
Well, my experience was very different from Rob's. Rob's had to struggle with isolation. And although I was alone, I never once felt alone. I had so much support and help from my friends, from Rabbi Baisley, Rabbi Miller, the temple, our temple friends, the friends of a lifetime, our neighbors, and especially our family. They were absolutely wonderful. They brought food. They had special food ordered in for me. The cards and the personal letters that my grandchildren wrote, that was so uplifting that I was in a very good place. Picking Rob up from the hospital, it was a little daunting to see all the equipment loaded into the car, from wheelchairs and walkers and shower chairs, and it was just so much that was going to be needed. And I knew that Rob was still in the deep, dark woods, and it was going to be a long and complicated recovery. But when we got home, Rob could sit on his deck. That was almost like a little promised land, because I would paint little pictures for Rob when I talked to him, that I was cleaning the deck and staining it. And we've got the whole summer to spend together. We'll feel the sun on our faces. And that was an attainable goal. So that was something he knew that could happen. But once he got home, we really had to decide, how are we going to live on the first floor? And all the medications that Rob needed and the doses, everything changed so much that I had to make a spreadsheet. And then it kept changing so much that I had to go in, use the computer and type it and make a spreadsheet, because things were changing fast. The point you made about doctors not knowing, because this was so new to them, was so apt. But each hurdle we got over, and it was enough. It was enough to be home. It was enough to sit on the deck. It was enough to have a meal, even though it had to be a dialysis diet, but it was enough. When, as time went by, Rob, of course, is being tested and monitored all the time. So many televisits and in-person visits. And his nephrologist said, I know I can get you off dialysis. And Rob didn't believe it at all. Says, oh no. And I said to Rob, listen, look how far you've come already. You're the miracle man. And I said, maybe it'll just be a shorter time in dialysis, maybe 1 hour less, or maybe you might even be able to skip a day. You give it a chance. So we did the testing, and the doctor said, you can definitely be off dialysis. And that was heaven sent. Because when Rob realized, now we have freedom, he can eat what he wants. We have a longer time we can be away. That was a real blessing.
Yeah, looking back at it, it's like being in the promised land, so to speak. You know, I've arrived after an ordeal.
Well, it's still going on. But I have to say, with all the therapy that Rob got, he's continuing on his own. He's pumping iron every night. He's using the bands. He's on the wobble board. He's better than I am. And so we may still have a lot ahead of us. It's looking really good.
So glad.
I'm gonna thank you for your story, and where we're ending this, I'm gonna invite everybody to stay muted, but to sing along with us, Dayenu, because we're grateful.
Yes.
We're grateful for each of those steps.
And it's enough. Ilu Hotzianu, Hotzianu, mi Mitzrayim, Hotzianu, Dayenu, Die, die, enu, die, die, enu, die, die, enu, die, enu, die, enu. Ilu natan, natan, manu, natan, manu, et ha-Shabbos, natan, manu, et ha-Shabbat, die, enu. Die, die, enu, die, die, enu, die, die, enu, die, enu, die, enu. Ilu natan, natan, manu, et ha-Torah, natan, manu, et ha-Torah. Dayenu, die, Dayenu, die, Dayenu, die, Dayenu, Dayenu, Dayenu.
Our next story is about Felice Schrager, a pillar of the Anshe Emeth community for some 60 years. Felice fled Vienna on the eve of the Holocaust and eventually moved to Highland Park in 1950. We are joined this evening by her daughter, Victoria, who grew up in Highland Park and now lives in Fair Lawn, Bergen County, with Josh, her partner of 14 years. Victoria started a daily money management practice that serves seniors and busy adults, doing bill paying and administrative tasks. It's called Tender and Timely Daily Money Management. About 2 years ago, Victoria knew that Felice's time living alone was coming to an end. First, Felice moved to Stein in Somerset for a few months, then to Five Star, an independent living facility in Teaneck, very close to Victoria. But some dementia was making this difficult, so Felice settled on the Brookdale in Paramus, which provided more support. That was the week of Thanksgiving 2019. Victoria, how was she doing then?
She was still Felicing, but she was starting to deteriorate. Her dementia was she was becoming more strident and more difficult. And I tried to get her some aids, and she basically ran them out of town. She didn't want anybody helping her. And she really could no longer stay at the 5 Star where she had been for a few months. And so that's at that point when I moved her to the Brookdale, and I was a little afraid that she was going to poo-poo the place, that it wasn't fancy enough for her. But I think she kind of realized that she needed a place that she could just be comfortable and live out the rest of her time in. So I think, she also saw that, I was the one who was really kind of taking charge of moving her each time. And I think she saw that there was a burden on me to deal with, the situation. And so she embraced the Brookdale, which I was very thankful for. I was expecting pushback on that, and she said, "Okay, this is okay." So she did accept that.
And all of that was before COVID even emerged.
That's right.
Then what happened?
So the Brookdale is less than 10 minutes from my home. So it was really great for me. I was able to stop in and see her frequently. And then by the beginning of January, February, she was really starting to not be herself anymore. You could see in her face, in her expression, that she was kind of losing herself. She didn't have that bright, intelligent look in her eye anymore. And she was starting to deteriorate. They had let's see, my brother's birthday is January 12th. She came out to lunch with us, and not too far from here. And she told me, to look at the menu and figure out what she should order, which was never something that she would do.
That's not Felice.
She always knew what she wanted, and she was always, especially with the menu, she was very clear, and she was kind of, sort of becoming almost docile and saying, you decide for me, which was just so uncharacteristic of her. And then in February, they had this Mardi Gras celebration at the assisted living where she was, and she just she was dressed in a pink running suit, but she wasn't put together the way that she had always been in her life, and so we knew that she was kind of deteriorating further. But I kind of expected her to just sort of live out her days, and that it would just sort of be this gradual rundown. And I assumed that, her life would just kind of take this fairly long meandering path until her demise. And then in the beginning, so when they kind of shut down for the virus, I think Josh and I were there on like a Friday, maybe March 13th or something, whatever day that was. And they were literally like battening down the hatches, and we were there visiting her, and they were telling us that we needed to leave. And so she, of course, was complaining that I wasn't staying long enough. Um, and um, and that was really just, as everything was shutting down. And then I would call her on the telephone, and she would be she couldn't really connect with me on the phone very much anymore. She was reading the numbers off of the television. Oh, 600,000 people have the virus. And, she was kind of not really um, connecting with me so much anymore. So I knew that, she was just, it was very difficult to keep that connection with her, and I wasn't able to see her. So it was very difficult to know that she was, so close to where I lived, and yet I couldn't go over to see her.
You got a phone call from the assisted living center.
Right. So they called me, I believe it was March 27th. It was like a Thursday, and they said, we have to send your mother to the hospital. She's got a low grade fever, and she's presumed positive with the virus. And so they asked me which hospital I wanted them to send her to, and they called back and said they're full, you can't send her there. And first off, the idea of her going to the hospital was horrible, because I thought for sure if she doesn't have the virus now, she's going to get it in the hospital, because it was March 27th. It was the very beginning of everything. And they called back and they said, they're filled to capacity. Where else do you want to go? I said, fine, send her to Hackensack. And so she went to Hackensack, and the whole day I could barely get anybody. There was like nobody to talk to. It was very complicated, and really just everything was so, anxiety ridden on every side. And finally, at around 11 at night, they called and said, okay, you can come and pick her up. So they said, we have no ambulances, there's no transport. You've got to come and get her and bring her back to the facility.
Was she better?
So I said to them, well, what's wrong? And they said, well, we tested her. She has a UTI. I said, well, does she have the virus? And they said, well, we don't have enough tests to give. We gave her a chest x-ray that was clear. So we're going to send her home saying, that it's just a UTI, because we have to save those tests for people that are clearly showing symptoms of the virus. And this is before, they knew about asymptomatic cases, I think. I don't think that was even something that people were aware of at the time. So Josh and I, around 1:45 went to pick her up. It was harrowing. There was, I was so afraid of walking into an emergency room in the hospital. I thought it was going to be crawling with people. And there was a station outside where they had gloves, they had a mask, they had a gown. And I went in, and there were just a couple of people. It was like this eerie scene there. There were a few people that looked really scared in the emergency room. And they were very kind, and they finally, we were waiting and waiting. They finally rolled her out, and she was wearing a a hospital gown. She was in a wheelchair, and her clothes were on the back. It was March 27th. It was cold out. So I had to take her into the bathroom to dress her. And I was afraid to touch anything. I was afraid to put anything on the floor. It was so scary. And I am so grateful. There was a woman there who was moonlighting from the assisted living, and she saw my mom, and she came and helped me dress her. My mother was like a dead weight. She couldn't move. She was barely communicative. She'd been sleeping all day. I guess I don't think she had the virus at the time. I think she was just had, this UTI had maybe, gone on too long. And so she was pretty sick from it. We came back, we brought her to the assisted living facility. Um, and it was eerie there also. It was just strange. It was all so strange. Um, and uh, and then they called me a couple days later and said that my mom was hardly eating, that she wasn't really eating. And so I knew that it was the beginning of the end. And then my brother prevailed upon them to let him come to visit her, because he said, look, it sounds like, everybody was pretty clear that she was dying. And so he came to visit her. He had to wear a mask. And then once he was in the room with her, he took his mask off because he felt like she didn't recognize him. And he also wanted, I guess, to see that, just her to see his face. And so as he was leaving, they were coming around with the cart to test for the virus. And my mother apparently had agreed to be tested, because at that time, people had to agree to be tested, which was very unFelice like also, because up until then, she was, denying access to any doctors or anything like that. She wouldn't see anybody. She wasn't taking the medications. She was on her own, path with that. But she apparently had agreed to be tested for the virus, and they tested her, and they called us the next day and said, 2 days later, and said that she tested positive for the virus. 2 days after that, my brother had a mild fever, and then it went away. So we thought, whoa, okay, maybe he doesn't have it. And then that Thursday morning, so then uh, they called. We knew that she was in the throes. Okay. We knew that she was in the throes of dying, and they called me and said, you can come to see her. So I came 3 times, knowing that she had the virus. And they said, stay no more than 5 to 10 minutes. So I masked up each time. Each time I came home, and I, took off my shoes and my clothes at the door, ran into the shower. It was very disturbing, and it was really just such a sad and difficult time. But my duty was to be there for her, and to come and see her, um, and let her know that I was there for her.
Despite the fear that you had that you could contract the virus,
Right,
like your brother had.
right, right.
Did you
And
get it?
my brother, so they called on that Thursday. I had seen her 3 times after we knew that she had the virus, and they called on that Thursday and said that she had passed away. And that was like the same day that my brother said, and I have a fever again. So it was Pesach. And so we could not bury her that Friday. We had to wait till the Sunday, which was Chol Hamoed, to be able to bury her. And at the last minute, we decided that with everything going on, that I would officiate the service at the graveside. And
Because there would be no service here at Aunt Shamit's, as normally we would expect.
No, we
And-
couldn't, and my mother was someone who loved ceremoniousness. And it was so unfair in a way that, we didn't get to have this, last ritual for her with the normal ceremonies. And so antithetical to the way that, she was and how she felt things should be done. But at the same time, as we were saying in our conversation earlier, Fred, she was someone who would vocalize her, being against something, and yet she would then sort of pick up the pieces and move forward with what was there and what she had to do, because she knew that she wasn't just going to abandon something just because it wasn't working out the way that she wanted it to. So she always believed in, going forward. And so it was just the family, and my nephew was on the phone. And we had a very intimate graveside service. And Bennett had written an acrostic for her, which was every letter of the alphabet, with each letter representing something about Felice. It was very nice, and it really fit her well. And so we read that as well, Passover style, Seder style, where everybody took a few letters and read a little bit of the acrostic. And we weren't even allowed to see them. I mean, this was the time when they were literally like taking the box out of the hearse and putting it into the ground, and they covered all the dirt over. We couldn't even see them doing any of this. They kept us in one area and told us, to stay over there until they were done, and then they moved, and then we were allowed to move in to the graveside area. So
So when you got to the graveside, her casket was in the ground and the ground was covered up.
yes. So we all just put some dirt on top, as a ceremonious act. But
Was your brother able to be there, or was he
my
sick?
brother was there. My parents they're buried next to each other now along the Palisades up in Farview, New Jersey, Mount Moriah Cemetery. And my sister-in-law never got the virus. From the minute that my brother went to see my mother, it was like she was prescient. She told my brother that he was not allowed to, sleep in the bed with her, that he needed to separate himself and quarantine after seeing my mother. And so they were able, she never got the virus, thankfully. And yes, so they actually drove up in separate cars. The 1 hour and 10-minute drive from Highland Park, they actually drove in separate cars. And
how old was your mom? Is that a question? Is that a bad question?
well, so
Oh.
I will say that my mother was someone who disliked being asked that question.
Okay, I apologize.
So
No,
in
it's
her
history,
honor,
okay.
I will say that
Her 90s.
she was into her 90s.
Right, that's what I
and,
figured.
Just, it's one last piece is that my grandmother, apparently her mother was someone also who didn't like to say how old she was. And so my mother lied by 2 years on my grandmother's tombstone. But my brother and I, being my mother's children, don't agree with that approach. And so we're going to put her real years onto her tombstone.
Okay.
So That's,
Okay.
That's
And what you're
all.
telling us is if we want to find out, we're going to have to go.
that's
and
right.
pay our
You'll have to
respects.
go up to Mount Moriah.
But the 2 years we gave Felicia's mother, we're taking off of Victoria in honor of the tradition.
Wow. Wow.
It's an amazing story for an amazing person who we miss. And this is the first Seder that we've had here like this, that she's not sitting right in front of the front table. And I know a lot of people who are listening now or on the replay will just be shedding tears for Felice because we all loved her. And
Thank you.
and you have our condolences. If anybody wants to be in touch with me later to hear that acrostic from Rabbi Miller, I can share that with them. And now in honor of, thank you, Victoria.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for that story and for your sharing your experience. In honor of Felice, we have this song updated to Passover this year. Sing along if you can pick up the chorus.
So I decided to write a parody, and I wrote one to Let My People Go, and tried to make it a little bit more timely. Okay. When COVID came to take us down, bring me that vaccine. It made us sick from town to town. Bring me that vaccine. Moderna, Pfizer, J&J, please send our way. Doctors, nurses, bring me that vaccine. We wore our masks, we stayed apart. Bring me that vaccine. Yet COVID found us from the start. Bring me that vaccine. Moderna, Pfizer, J&J, please send our way. Doctors, nurses, bring me that vaccine. So many groups it took too fast. Bring me that vaccine. When did we see our parents last? Bring me that vaccine. Moderna, Pfizer, J&J, please send our way. Doctors, nurses, bring me that vaccine. The surges come, we're never safe. Bring me that vaccine. Now variants challenge every place. Bring me that vaccine. Moderna, Pfizer, J&J, please send our way. Doctors, nurses, bring me that vaccine. Last verse. This plague we've learned affects us all. Bring me that vaccine. We must stay strong. We will not fall. Bring me that vaccine. Moderna, Pfizer, J&J, please send our way. Doctors, nurses, bring me that vaccine.
Thank you, Paul. Our third and last guest this Seder is Helene Greenberg. And if she can be highlighted. Hello, Helene. Helene grew up in New Hyde Park, Long Island, before getting her bachelor's degree in nursing from Boston University and starting off at Mass General. After moving to New Jersey, Helene and husband Mike raised their 2 children in South Brunswick. They've been Temple members for 23 years. Until recently, Helene worked as a nurse at the Rutgers Cancer Institute of New Jersey for 13 years. Now she splits her time with a home in Lenox, Massachusetts in the Berkshires, where she is joining us from now. With that active nursing license, though, Helene has volunteered at vaccination clinics at the Heldridge Hotel in downtown New Brunswick, at the Princeton Alliance Church in Plainsboro, and the Berkshire Community College in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, where she was on Thursday. Helene, thanks for joining us. Paint us the picture of what it's like to work at one of these vaccine clinics. What's the tone or the mood of people as they begin to assemble and line up?
So the clinics are giving between 500 and 1,000 vaccines in about a 4-hour period. So it's very methodical. There's a little bit of a charged anxiety. It's very serious. People are going through their registration and moving through the lines pretty quietly, more serious. It's a lot of people that they're getting through, the clinic.
By the time people get to you, they've probably been in the line for a long time. You're the one with the syringe. Has their mood changed by the time they sit down and roll up their sleeve?
It actually runs the spectrum from those who are so overjoyed and thankful to be there. Some who are actually quite fearful. They have anxiety. It's been a long year. All that anxiety is coming to the surface. Sometimes they need a little coaxing to actually get the vaccine. And then across the board, absolute enjoyment, overjoyed. They're just thrilled beyond thrilled. They're thanking me. They're just seeing a light at the end of the tunnel.
Are they doing a lot of selfies?
We're actually not allowing it.
Okay,
They don't allow it at our clinics
Okay.
for sort of, privacy issues.
Yes,
But
yes.
yeah, they want to.
What was it like when you got the vaccine?
Well, I actually had to drive almost an hour to get mine. And I was anxious. My husband drove me. He had already had his first vaccine, and I found myself so quiet and anxious. It was so different from what I expected, and a little impatient. I had to wait a little while. And then same thing, I got my shot and I almost hugged the pharmacist. It was great. It was such an overwhelming sense of just happiness. Like, we're almost there. We're almost there. It was incredible, honestly.
Have you seen that experience from others that you vaccinated?
Yes.
Having that release, and how do they express themselves?
So I had one woman, she was so anxious to get it. And then she didn't realize I already gave her the shot. I've given only Moderna, and apparently it's not painful at all. And she started singing. She was thanking me, and we were talking. And again, that sense of we're almost there. It's been a long year. She had the most soulful voice, and she started singing Amazing Grace. Right there, just at our station, where there's 5 stations lined up, and she starts singing with this smile, and I just was beaming. I was just beaming. It was surreal. It's really surreal.
And Helene, this will be the shortest of our 3 guests, because it's such a happy moment, and the hopeful place that we want this. We want to go, all of us.
Yeah.
But you're in the Berkshires, and that's the home of Tanglewood and the summer home of the Boston Symphony.
Yeah.
Are there musicians out there getting the vaccine?
Yes.
What's happened?
A famous story now already here in the Berkshires. Yo-Yo Ma spends half of his time living up here. And he came to the Berkshire Community College, where they have a vaccine clinic. And at the end, after he got his second shot and he had to wait the mandatory 15 minutes, he actually pulled out his cello and he gave a private concert. And the local papers caught the mood perfectly. The nurse, first of all, that was giving him the shot was starstruck. And the nurse next to her was anxious, like, oh my God, it's Yo-Yo Ma. and he starts playing, and the whole entire gymnasium filled with his music. And the nurse started crying. It's overwhelming for us too. I mean, we worked so hard now to help in the beginning for the last year helping, and now helping to reach that hope and to give people what they need to get them, keep themselves healthy and bring our communities back. His music transcended the entire gymnasium. The volunteers, the nurses who are paid to be there, the other people who are getting their vaccines. It was an incredible story. I wish I had been there, but it's quite famous for our parts here.
Helene, thank you. Thank you for doing the vaccinations, and thanks for sharing.
And thank you for having me. And please, everybody, get your vaccine when you're eligible. And I wish you all well.
And though we don't have Yo-Yo Ma here, we will bring back the wonderful memory of Debbie Friedman and sing, "And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long. And Miriam the prophet took her timbrel in her hand, and all the women followed her just as she had planned. And Miriam raised her voice with song. She sang with praise and might. We've just lived through a miracle. We're going to dance tonight." And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long.
Fantastic, fantastic. Before we go to our two concluding prayers, Paul and I would like to say a few thank yous. Thank you to Paula Tartikoff and Russ Einbinder for historical and technical assistance. Thanks to the temple staff. Thanks to Team Batea Vone, which, well, didn't show up this year, but no.
but cooks all the time.
And we want to thank them for cooking for all the previous Seders, and in advance, we're thanking them for cooking next year. And thank you for coming for next year. And to thank Rabbi Baisley, Rabbi Glasser, Cantor Stanton, and a big, big thank you to our guests this year, Chris and Rob Sullivan, Victoria Schrager and Helene Greenberg, for sharing their experiences. Thank you. We conclude this evening with a new prayer, and then a prayer we've always said at the end of our Seders. Adonai Elohim, generations ago when we were enslaved in the land of Egypt, you heard our pleas. What did we say then? What did we sound like? More importantly, what do we say now? We remember, and we need you to remember. We're putting you on notice. We're still your people, and you're still our God. How do we sound to you now? We pray by crawling into bed and pulling covers over our faces. We pray by losing sleep. We pray by looking into the blackness. We pray by gaining weight, letting our hair change color, not buying new clothes. We pray by struggling through fear. The strength of everyday perseverance is our prayer. Everything we've done is praying because it's all filled with hope for an end and for deliverance. And almost everything is beyond our control. We didn't start this plague. We won't cause it to end. In fact, there's so little we can do. It's humbling. It's humiliating. And aren't those some of the halting steps towards prayer, towards you? We prayed by begging scientists for an answer. We prayed that regulators agreed with scientists and approved. We prayed for EUAs after learning what emergency use authorizations were. We prayed for BioNTech, which we'd never heard of before. We prayed for freezers that stayed very cold. We prayed that the internet would connect us to vaccine appointments, and we hit refresh and refresh and refresh. We prayed that the lines wouldn't be too long to get those vaccines. We prayed for vials, for doses of, we prayed for vials with 10 doses that actually contained 11. Sound like Hanukkah, anyone? We prayed that our arms wouldn't hurt for the first shot. We prayed for mild side effects from the second shot. We prayed that there'd only be one shot. We prayed that those with hard hearts in defiance of all the plague will change their mind like Pharaoh did and get the vaccine themselves, all of them. We need everyone together to beat this plague. Does this sound familiar to you? Is this what we sounded like in Egypt? I hope so, because it worked then, and we need it to work again. Remember who you are. We know who we are. That's why we're doing this. We have told the Passover story to our children again right here. Now end this plague like you did before. We are the children of Israel. You led us out of Egypt to be your God. We've done our part. Now do yours.
Lishana haba b'Yerushalayim, 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 Lishana haba Birushalayim.
Next year in Jerusalem, next year in person, next year vaccinated. Everybody, thank you for being with us. Please get vaccinated as soon as you can, and good night.
Thank you very much, Fred and Paula, and thank you to everyone who spoke. I felt like to some degree I was reliving some of the past year with these stories, and as Helene said, we are going on to a better footing right now than we were last March. So I want to thank you for putting this together and for making this the powerful Seder that it was. Everybody stay safe, and L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. Thank you all. And by all means, unmute yourself, and you can chat for a little while. I'm turning off the recording of this so that we can post on YouTube, but it's good to see everybody.